Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 23 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam. And we are in, day 23 of the second canto. We are in the 7th chapter, and today we are starting with, let me just see, verse 36. Right. And this is the chapter about, the second chapter about incarnations. And verse 36 is about Srila Vyasadeva. All right, so let us begin first of all, though, with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Kauravani Pracharne Nera Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschachate Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyas Kripas Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Very good, let us begin. Verse 36, translation. The Lord himself in his incarnation as the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, will consider his compilation of the Vedic literature to be very difficult for the less intelligent persons with short life, and thus he will divide the tree of Vedic knowledge into different branches, according to the circumstances of the particular age. So let's have a look at the purport. First point to note, and we must note it carefully, and actually we saw it in the verse itself, is that this is dealing with the future. Lord Brahma is talking, and he is now saying about Vyasadeva what will happen in the future, that when the Lord appears as Vyasadeva, then at that time he'll consider his existing compilation of Vedic literature to be very difficult for less intelligent persons. Means the average person in Kali Yuga, basically. So then he'll divide up the Vedic literatures. All right. So, we all know Kali Yuga is extremely difficult. This verse in the first canto we looked at, it said that people are short-lived, above all always disturbed, and basically perplexed with many problems based on godlessness. Advancement of material comforts is ignorance, Prabhupada says. Real advancement of knowledge means development of knowledge of self-realization. But of course in Kali Yuga people think that the very short lifetime, only 100 years, but now it's effectively much less, or typically much less. They think that this is all in all, and we must enjoy life as much as possible in the short time that we have. And that's just terrible shame. They're considered less intelligent because they have no knowledge of the eternity of life and what must therefore be done with life, considering that it's eternal. They consider the temporary body the basic principle of life, and in this way says they're equal to asses and bulls, Prabhupada says. But still, out of kindness, the Lord gives them Vedic knowledge in brief forms, like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. And all these literatures compiled by Vyasadeva, it's the same picture. It's the same, that they're all compiled with these considerations in mind: short-lived, quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, and above all, always disturbed. So here's the translation of verse 37. When the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets, prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha, and will preach on sub-religious principles. So obviously this Buddha is in the future, in a different Kali Yuga, because he does things totally different to what our more recent Buddha did. So he came in one of the Kali Yugas in the life of this, or no, in the life of a Manu, some Manu, we don't know which one. And of course he preaches ahimsa, which is just common sense. It's not really dharma or religion, but it's important for religious people. And it's common sense, because if you hurt others, they'll hurt you. So who wants to get hurt? Therefore we should refrain from hurting others. But actually, to make it really effective, we must learn humility and pridelessness. If you don't follow them, you can't really be non-violent. You'll still have the tendency towards violence. Then after ahimsa, you have to learn tolerance and simplicity of living, high thinking and simple living, simple living and high thinking. Then you have to offer respect to religious leaders and train the senses to become detached. Then you have to do devotional service. So ultimately one has to accept the Lord and become a devotee. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in religious principles, there must be God in the center. Otherwise, simple moral instructions are merely sub-religious principles, generally known as upa-dharma, or nearness to religious principles. Right, so verse 38, devotees. Verse 38 is about Kalki. Thereafter, at the end of Kali Yuga, when there exist no topics on the subject of God, even at the residences of so-called saints and respectable gentlemen of the three higher castes, and when the power of government is transferred to the hands of ministers elected from the low-born Sudra class, or those less than them, and when nothing is known of the techniques of sacrifice, even by word, at that time the Lord will appear as the supreme chastiser. Yes, well again, obviously this is the future, end of Kali Yuga. So, excuse me. So these are symptoms of Kali Yuga. The essence of it all is godlessness. Even people considered saints will be atheists. They'll forget names of God and what to speak of his activities. And the necessity, there's a necessity. The three higher classes must know about the Supreme Lord. Saints and higher people judged by how much they know of the Lord, or tattva gyan. That's how they should be judged, not by birth. Birth designation without Krishna consciousness and devotional service is simply decorations of a dead body. So, when people are so much into that, then so many anomalies appear in society. It's really not good at all. Yes. So, such people are not twice born. They're like animals, really. They're only once born. The government will be by Sudras, real leaders. But I mean, that's so much the situation right now. Government leaders are Sudras. But so therefore education is needed for the ministers and the government people, otherwise the whole situation's going to become pathetic. And you can't expect peacefulness or prosperity with such people running things. And Prabhupada makes the point, which we've already just mentioned, that the situation's already like that. Yes. So then when things are like that and it's all just built up to such a point, I mean, just even worse, much worse than it is today, then Kalki comes and kills all those demoniac leaders and just basically everyone except the few devotees who there are. Okay, so now we go on to the next section, which is just very short. It's verses, it's a normal length. Verse 39 to 49, and the subject matter is Lord Brahma concludes his glorification of the Lord and the process for approaching him. Yes, and it's verses 39 to 49. So first of all, we'll read the verses. At the beginning of creation there are penance, myself, Brahma, and the Prajapatis, the great sages who generate. Then during the maintenance of the creation there are Lord Vishnu, the demigods with controlling powers, and the kings of different planets. But at the end there's irreligion, and then Lord Shiva and the atheists full of anger, etc. All of them are different representative manifestations of the energy of the supreme power, the Lord. 40. Who can describe completely the prowess of Vishnu? Even the scientist who might have counted the particles of the atoms of the universe cannot do so, because it is he only who in his form of Trivikram moved his leg effortlessly beyond the topmost planet Satyaloka up to the neutral state of the three modes of material nature, and all were moved. 41. Neither I nor all the sages born before you know fully the omnipotent personality of Godhead. So what can others who are born after us know about him? Even the first incarnation of the Lord, namely Shesha, has not been able to reach the limit of such knowledge, although he's describing the qualities of the Lord with 1,000 faces. 42. But anyone who is specifically favored by the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. Verses 43 to 45 together. O Narada, although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, still, because we're all surrendered souls, we know how he acts through Yogamaya potencies. And similarly, the potencies of the Lord are also known to the all-powerful Shiva, the great king of the atheist family, namely Prahlad Maharaj, Swayambhuva Manu, his wife Shatarupa, his sons and daughters like Priyavrata, Uttanapad, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, Prachanabarhi, Ribu, Anga, the father of Vena, Maharaj Dhruva, Ikshvaku, Aila, Muchakunda, Maharaj Janaka, Gadi, Raghu, Ambarish, Saga, Gaya, Nahusha, Mandamata, Alarka, Shatadanve, Anu, Rantidev, Bhishma, Bali, Amortairaya, Dilip, Sobari, Utanka, Shibi, Devala, Pipalada, Saraswata, Uddhava, Parashara, Burishain, Vibhishan, Hanuman, Shukadev Goswami, Arjuna, Arishtasena, Vidura, Shrutadev, etc. So they all know. They all know the Lord. 46. Surrendered souls, even from groups leading sinful lives, such as women, the labor class, the mountaineers and the Siberians, or even the birds and beasts, can also know about the science of Godhead and become liberated from the clutches of the illusory energy by surrendering unto the pure devotees of the Lord and by following in their footsteps in devotional service. 47. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of transcendental bliss without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the supreme enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter, uncontaminated and without distinctions. He is the principle of the primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. 48. In such a transcendental state, there is no need of artificial control of the mind, mental speculation or meditation, as performed by the Gyanis and Yogis. One gives up such processes as the heavenly king, Indra, forgoes the trouble to dig a well. And 49. The personality of Godhead is the supreme master of everything auspicious, because the results of whatever actions are performed by the living being in either the material or spiritual existence are awarded by the Lord. As such, he is the ultimate benefactor. Every individual living entity is unborn, and therefore even after the annihilation of the material elementary body, the living entity exists exactly like the air within the body. Okay, so let's go into things in more depth. First, verse 39. At the beginning of creation, there are penance. Myself, Brahma, and the Prajapatis, the great sages who generate. Then, during the maintenance of the creation, there are Lord Vishnu, the demigods with controlling powers, and the kings of different planets. But at the end there is irreligion, and then Lord Shiva and the atheists full of anger, etc. All of them are different representative manifestations of the energy of the supreme power, the Lord. Right, let's look at the purport. So this material world is created by the energy of the Lord, manifested in the beginning by the penance of Brahma, and then the 9 Prajapatis, who are known as great sages. Then in the next stage, maintenance, where Lord Vishnu is the presiding deity. There's devotional service and real religion, plus the demigods, who are the kings of planets who maintain the world. Then at the end, at the time of winding up the creation, first there's irreligion, then Shiva and the angry atheists. But all of these, Prabhupada makes the point, all of these are manifestations of the Lord, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So ultimately it's all to give a chance for liberation, and if one develops the mode of goodness under the protection of Lord Vishnu, then such a person has the greatest chance for this. Yes, for liberation and going back to Godhead. Okay, verse 40. Who can describe completely the prowess of Vishnu? Even the scientist who might have counted the particles of the atoms of the universe cannot do so, because it is he only who in his form of Trivikram moved his leg effortlessly beyond the topmost planet Satyaloka up to the neutral state of the 3 modes of material nature, and all were moved. Okay, so the highest level of science now is atomic energy, but they, even though somehow or other they're able to utilize that, engage that, they still can't say how many atoms in the universe. But even if you can, or as Prabhupada says, or if you're able to roll up the sky like one's bedding, he says in the purport, you still can't estimate the extent of prowess of the Lord, because it goes way beyond this universe and the number of atoms in it or anything to do with it. So here he's addressed as Trivikram in the verse 40, because he stepped over the universe as Vamana, Krama meaning step, and Tri meaning three, and Vikrama means like really special steps. So he penetrated the coverings, the Ganges gate came through, and Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in other words, no one is equal to the transcendently powerful Vishnu. He's omnipotent, and no one is equal to or greater than him. 41. Neither I nor all the sages born before you know fully the omnipotent personality of Godhead. So what can others who are born before us know about him? Even the first incarnation of the Lord, namely Shesha, has not been able to reach the limit of such knowledge, although he's describing the qualities of the Lord with 1,000 faces. Means 1,000 faces, of course. So, yes, omnipotent, he's the all-powerful, and he has three potencies, internal, external, marginal. Each one expands unlimitedly, each one. So therefore no one can calculate the extent of the expansions, because even Shesha can't. Although he's been describing them continuously with his 1,000 faces and has not repeated one of the pastimes. 42. But anyone who's specifically favored by the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, Hare Krishna, cannot do so. Okay, here's the purport. So, of course, the unalloyed devotees know the glories of the Lord. They know how great he is, how great's the expansion of his energies. But those who are attached to the body, they can't enter into the science. They're all ignorant of the science of God, this Vedic science. They always work for their body, for their kinsmen, their countrymen, etc. They got all sorts of philanthropic programs from the political point of view, but none of them go beyond identifying with the body and the mind. So therefore no one in ordinary life is freed from bodily consciousness and therefore able to have knowledge of God. And Prabhupada says, and unless there's knowledge of God, all advancement of material civilization, however dazzling, should be considered a failure. Yes. So verses 43 and 45, if you remember, that's that whole list of the surrendered souls who know how the Lord acts through the Yogamaya potencies. So, it's mainly, to a great extent, this huge list of different people who did that successfully. So Prabhupada, so I won't read the list. Prabhupada in the purport explains how that all the great devotees from the past, all the devotees who will come in the future, those who will flourish or are flourishing at present, they're aware of the different potencies of the Lord, along with the potencies of his names, etc. So Prabhupada raises the question, how do they know? Not by speculation of spiritual advancement. Yes, for example, there's so many planets in the universe, and the scientists don't even know they exist. It's really something extraordinary. And those are displays of the Lord's material energy, and what to speak of the Lord's spiritual energy. How can the scientists then know that if they're not devotees? Speculation with if this and maybe that can't help. People, if they want to understand God, well, if people dismiss God, then their lives will end in despair. So the Lord can only be known by surrendered souls. Prabhupada refers to the Upanishads, which say that the Lord cannot be known by working hard, taxing the brain, speculating, word jugglery, only known by surrendered souls. And here Lord Brahma acknowledges this. Therefore it's a waste of time pursuing experimental knowledge, and people must give this up. Prabhupada then concludes the purport by saying, one should gain knowledge by surrendering unto the Lord and by acknowledging the authority of the persons mentioned herein. The Lord is unlimited, and by the grace of Yoga Maya, helps the surrendered soul to know him proportionately with the advance of one's surrender. That's the bottom line, what needs to advance, where advancement needs to be. It needs to be in surrender. So this verse gives the proper answer. We should surrender to Krishna via the spiritual master, and for that there's no need for material qualification, as is required for material service. So in spiritual life, only surrender is required, and that's up to us. If you surrender immediately, your spiritual life begins immediately. So we have to surrender to the spiritual master, who Prabhupada basically says the spiritual master is the loving representative of the Lord, but he is more kind and easier to approach than the Lord. Sinful people, they just cannot approach the Lord directly. But in many cases they can approach the pure devotee. So then even if you're very sinful or whatever you are, if you're a great person already, very pure and sincere, but if you agree to be guided by the pure devotee, then you can understand the science of God and go back to Godhead. So there's a short second paragraph. Let me just read it. So realization of the science of Godhead and relief from the unnecessary, useless struggle for existence are not at all difficult for the willing candidate, but they're very difficult for persons who are not surrendered souls, but only simple, profitless speculators. Verse 40. 7. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He's eternally void of all disturbances and he is fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter, uncontaminated and without distinctions. He is the principle of the primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there's no sacrifice for fruitive activities, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Well, yes, so there's a major purport here. Let's go through it. So first of all, Prabhupada makes the point, the Lord is the summum bonum of everything, because he's the cause of all causes. Brahman realization is the first step, just distinguishing what is spirit from material existence. And therefore it's like light is distinct from darkness. But light has variegatedness. There are all sorts of lights. And spiritual realization does too. There's all sorts of spiritual realizations. So the ultimate Brahman realization is to realize that person who is the source of the Brahmajyoti, the Brahman light, means the Supreme Lord. He's summum bonum, ultimate source of everything, including our situations, our realizations. So, when we meet the Lord, Brahman realization is included. It's very simple. Paramatma is the second stage, the super soul. Yes. And the Supreme Personality. Brahman realization is the first step. Paramatma second. Supreme Personality of Godhead third. So, okay, there's a short third paragraph which refers to a word, a term in the first line of the Sanskrit, pratibodha matram, which means the opposite of material existence. So the thing is, in matter there are material miseries, and the first realization, which is Brahman, it negates them, negates those material miseries. So therefore there is that person at that stage gets a feeling of eternal existence, distinct from the pangs of birth and death, etc. A type of liberation. And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, that is the primary conception of impersonal Brahman. So the Supreme Lord is the soul of everything, and in the Supreme conception, he's realized and affection for him is there. Yes, so this conception of happiness, of affection or love, not just happiness, affection, is due to the relationship of soul to soul, like father to son. Well, I mean, father to son is not a good example of that. Prabhupada makes the point, because many times in relationships between fathers and sons, the relationships break down. Prabhupada says, that sort of affection in the material world is full of limitations. How true. Yes. So, but when we meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fullness of affection manifests. Yes, full affection. Because of the reality of that affectionate relationship. The Lord is not the object of affection in such a relationship on the basis of the body or the mind. But he is the full, Prabhupada even says, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities, because he's super soul. But in the liberated state of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord's awakened. So, okay, in the next paragraph, Prabhupada makes the point that when we are in such a relationship with the Lord, there's an unlimited flow of everlasting happiness without any fear of it being broken like in the material world. Actually, our relationship with the Lord is never broken, just forgotten. So there's no grief or fear. And you can't explain that relationship. Yeah, it's transcendental, above and beyond our senses and minds. Therefore, only perceivable by those who are on the spiritual platform. So this affectionate relationship with the Lord is not just a negation of misery. In the Krishna conscious state, we have senses, and so does the Lord, and they're all pure. And the material energy cannot work there. As we read in the first canto, being ashamed to appear before the Lord and the devotees. And Prabhupada makes an interesting point. In the material world, the senses are not without grief, but the senses of the Lord and the devotees. I mean, this means material senses are not without grief, but the senses of the Lord and the devotees are without any grief. So Prabhupada concludes this paragraph. There's a distinct difference between the material and spiritual senses. And one should understand it without denying the spiritual senses because of a material conception. Okay, and here we go, devotees, the last paragraph. So our senses in the material world are just surcharged with ignorance. So therefore spiritual authorities have recommended purifying the senses. Yeah. In this, and the nature of that problem is that the material senses are used for our satisfaction. But in the spiritual world, the senses are used for satisfying the Lord, which is what they're originally made for. So those activities with the senses in loving relationship with the Lord, those activities are natural, and therefore the sense gratification there is unlimited. Means particularly for the Lord, but we also enjoy fantastically. So that satisfaction is equally shared by all of those who reciprocate together in those relationships. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the whole purport by saying, since the activities are unlimited and constantly increasing, There's no scope for material attempts or artificial arrangements. Such happiness of transcendental quality is called Brahma Sokyam, which will be clearly described in the 5th canto. Yes, so in the spiritual world, it's just so wonderful. Yes. Okay, so we go on to verse 48. In such a transcendental state, there is no need of artificial control of the mind, mental speculation, or meditation as performed by the jnanis and yogis. One gives up such processes as the heavenly king Indra forgoes the trouble to dig a well. Yes. So we don't bother doing such things. No need. No need. Just like Lord Indra has plenty of water supply, so he doesn't bother digging a well. So Prabhupada discusses that a poor man who needs water digs a well with difficulty. So those who are poor in self-realization, they speculate or meditate by controlling the senses, not by being focused on the Lord, not by serving the Lord, but speculating, meditating. So they don't know that control of the senses and spiritual achievement are possible as soon as you do devotional service, So therefore liberated souls also want to associate together by hearing and chanting. And a good example is Lord Indra, who controls water so he doesn't have to dig a well for personal use. So similarly, those in devotional service, they have achieved the goal of life. So they don't need to speculate to find the truth. They already have the truth. Yes. So they don't have to meditate on the identity of the Lord. So because they're engaged in devotional service, they've already achieved all the results of mental speculation and meditation and a lot more. So Srila Prabhupada therefore concludes the purport by saying, the real perfection of life is therefore to be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And verse 49, the personality of Godhead is the supreme master of everything auspicious, because the results of whatever actions are performed by the living being in either the material or spiritual existence are awarded by the Lord. As such, he is the ultimate benefactor. Every individual living entity is unborn, and therefore even after the annihilation of the material elementary body, the living entity exists, exactly like the air within the body. Okay, now again, this has a substantial purport. Let's go through. So, first thing Prabhupada does is just mention some very foundational knowledge. We're unborn and eternal. And as Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 3 says, we're not exhausted even though the body is vanquished. Of course, in material life, actions are rewarded generally more in the next life, but even also to some degree in the present life. So similarly, the Lord gives rewards, which are the 5 types of liberation. Yes. And even an impersonalist, even the staunchest impersonalist who doesn't think that the Lord is the Lord, even such an impersonalist cannot merge with Brahman without the Lord's mercy. So they make their choices and the Lord rewards them accordingly. So, okay, second paragraph. So everyone should worship the Lord to achieve their goals. Yes. And including the impersonalists, Prabhupada says, instead of speculating or meditating, they can directly execute the routine devotional service of the Lord and thus easily obtain the desired goal. Right. Third paragraph. So, devotees, of course, are naturally inclined to become associates of the Lord and not merge, like the impersonalists. Therefore, they follow their natural instincts and achieve their goals of entering one of the rasas. So, through performing nice devotional activities like hearing and chanting, etc., they achieve a perfection far better than merging. Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, the devotees are therefore never advised to indulge in speculating upon the nature of the Supreme or artificially meditating on the void. So there's still more devotees, 3 more paragraphs. So we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that after the death of this body, there will be no body. No. We're unborn. We're eternal. Our material body is developed by material desire, and which means that the material body develops from the spirit soul. Prabhupada, to illustrate the point, gives the example of air. Air is inside and outside of the body. The living entity exists just like the air in the body. So when the body is vanquished, the soul, that's you and me, that's us, the soul continues to exist. So then by the direction of the Lord, when the devotee reaches that point, then the devotee is awarded a spiritual body in terms of his relationship with the Lord. Yes, in terms of the 4 Vaishnav liberations. And the 5th paragraph, the Lord is so kind that even if a devotee can't finish the process of devotional service, he gets another chance in the next life, as Bhagavad Gita chapter, I think, 6 says. So then he can easily finish the process, and after giving up that body, go back to Godhead. Bhagavad Gita, of course, confirms this. So, Prabhupada mentions how this is all there in Bhagavat Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami. Once achieving the spiritual existence, the devotee is eternally situated there, as already expressed in the previous verse. So we got 4 verses left, 50 to 53. Let's try and get through them all. The section is Lord Brahma asks Narada to expand the science further. I'll just read the verses and purports, because it's Brahma instructing Narada to preach, basically. Verse 50, my dear son, I've now explained in brief the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is creator of the manifested worlds. Without him, Hari, the Lord, there are no other causes of the phenomenal and noumenal existences, material and spiritual. So, okay, there are purports here. And Prabhupada makes the point, we've had so much experience in this world, and so much experience with the conditioned souls trying to lord it over this place and us. Yes. So Brahma has explained how this world is the work of the material energy and we're marginal energy. But he's behind all these things, but he's aloof. Everything's going on the basis of his potency, but personally, he's aloof. So Prabhupada says the potency and the potent are simultaneously one and different from one another. So second paragraph. So we should not blame the Lord for creating this horrible, miserable material world. Like a king should not be blamed for creating a prison. In both cases, they're there because there are deviants, and deviants need to be imprisoned and separated from the good citizens. Yes, both the prison house and the material world. 51. O Narada, the science of God, Srimad Bhagavatam, was spoken to me in summary by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it was spoken as the accumulation of his diverse potencies, the Lord's. Please expand this science yourself. So this is coming up in the 9th chapter, the Lord's main 4 instructions, or the Lord's main instructions to Lord Brahma. It's just coming up. Fairly soon we'll read them. So Brahma got Krishna, so it's not speculation. It's uncontaminated and perfect. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the direct incarnation of Krishna. But the thing is, we have to receive it in that line. Just like a mango, Prabhupada's given the example. At the top of the tree is the best mango, because it's exposed to the sun whatever time of the day. If mangoes are on this side of the tree or that side of the tree, they'll only be exposed to the sun, maybe in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, like that, not the whole day. But the one on top is exposed all the time, all day. So, but those, you can't just throw them down and hope someone will catch them softly enough. It's hardly possible. So therefore, those mangoes have to be handed down person by person. That's the parampara system. And if we try to understand the science in some other way, it'll be really difficult. All right, and Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, it should never be heard that the Bhagavatam, it should never be heard from the professional Bhagavatam reciters who earn their livelihood by gratifying the senses of the audience. Yeah, they're famous for presenting Bhagavatam, but in mundane ways, with mundane jokes and things, which the mundane audience will appreciate, and therefore, will donate and support them. 52. Please describe the science of Godhead with determination and in a manner by which it will be quite possible for the human being to develop transcendental devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Hari, the supersoul of every living being, and the sum bonum source of all energies. Yes, so, in other words, Srimad Bhagavatam is the philosophy of devotional service, scientifically presented to help us with our relationship with Krishna. Prior to this age, everyone knew these things, but in Kali Yuga, people don't know. Yes, so it has to be presented. As a result of doing so much nonsense, the people have forgotten their relationship with Krishna. But Bhagavatam is the torchlight for such blind people. Prabhupada says, therefore it was necessary to describe the science of God from the very beginning, or from the very birth of the phenomenal world. And in the second paragraph, Prabhupada makes very important points. It's so nicely scientifically presented, any sincere person will be able to understand the science of God. Yeah. Everyone's looking for happiness, they don't know where to find it, but Krishna's the reservoir of happiness. So real happiness can only be achieved by devotional service. Yeah. And only by his association will we get free from distresses. And even Prabhupada makes the point, even people who want material happiness can be successful through the Bhagavatam. So therefore, Narada is ordered by his spiritual master, Lord Brahma, to present it widely. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Narada was never advised to preach the principles of the Bhagavatam to earn a livelihood. He was ordered by his spiritual master to take the matter very seriously in a missionary spirit. Okay, one final verse. Don't mind, we're going little over time. Verse 53, the Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. Yes. So the science of learning a subject is different from sentiments of fanatics. Fanatics may think we don't have to hear about how the Lord is associated with the external energy, the material energy. They think they are higher, just focus on Radha and Krishna's relationship. But all the Lord's activities with both energies are equally good. And particularly those who are not completely free from the external energy should hear about Krishna's activities in relation to that energy, and not foolishly jump to the Rasa Leela, the internal energy pastimes. Yes. So Prabhupada says that cheap Bhagavatam reciters like to do that. And he says, pseudo-devotees absorbed in material sense enjoyment falsely jump to the stage of liberated souls and thus fall down deeply into the clutches of external energy. Then in the second paragraph, so the same point is made. Some like to hear about his pastimes in Vrindavan only, and don't want to hear about his pastimes of creation, maintenance, or destruction of the material world. But pure devotees know there's no difference between these. Yes. So the pastimes of the Purusha avatars, they are for the conditioned souls, and Rasa Leela, etc., for liberated souls. So the conditioned souls have to hear about his pastimes with the material energy, and they will be as beneficial as hearing the Rasa Leela in the liberated stage. And Prabhupada reminds us, Lord Chaitanya never indulged in hearing Rasa Leela with ordinary people. So, okay, here we go, devotees, concluding. First 9 cantos prepare us for the 10th. Yes. And the last chapter of this canto will explain this. And in the 3rd canto, these things will be further explained. So therefore, a pure devotee, someone who wants to become a pure devotee, has to begin hearing Bhagavatam from the beginning and not from the 10th canto. Prabhupada points out that some so-called devotees have asked him to speak from the 10th canto, but he refused, because he wants to present Bhagavatam as the science of God and not something sensuous, which is forbidden by Brahma. So Prabhupada concludes the purport and the chapter by saying, by reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as a scientific presentation, the conditioned souls will gradually be promoted to the highest status of transcendental knowledge after being freed from the illusory energy based on sense enjoyment. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.